Welcome into the HGC Eastern Clash here in South Korea, where it is now Championship Sunday. And today's lineup features four of the best teams here from the Eastern region, and they are star-studded. Make no mistake about it, today legends will fall, but champions will rise. My name is Jay Howe. Joining me are a couple of legends in their own right. I've got Dreadnought down on the end, and then Caldor here in the middle. Gentlemen, seems like this tournament has played out the way many thought it would be, but there's still a lot to be determined.
Yeah, Genji is dominant as expected, and every team you talk to immediately says, okay, they're going to be the ones taking it here, but of course they're going to try to topple the Giants.
Yeah, and I feel like if there's going to be a breaking point in the power levels of Genji, our very first series of the day has got to be that element. Tempest has been the squad that seems like they are the ones who can maybe bring that fight, and so I'm really hoping that, you know, at least here in the winner's bracket, that we do see some very competitive matches going forward.
We have seen quite a bit of entertainment throughout this tournament. Most notably, obviously, the Chinese teams brought a lot of competition towards some. BTG, obviously, they put on one of the best shows that we've seen from China in a while. But the four Korean teams all have stepped their game up. We had some epic series yesterday between some of these Korean teams, but so far it's been the dominance of Genji, which has been the story almost reminiscent of just last weekend where we had Dignitas repeating almost the same thing, going undefeated. The odds of Genji making it undefeated in here, how are you guys feeling about that? Because one game would mean a lot, but this is a team that seems to be heading for their destiny.
I think there's a good chance that they're going to start dropping a couple of maps. When you look at their play, especially on the first day, that wasn't as clean as a lot of people expected. Granted, it's the first day, so you never quite know, okay, how much can you evaluate that? But also, outside of Genji, I think yesterday, as you said, BTG was actually in a position where they really surprised, especially going up against Korea again. They really brought the fight. We had a lot of kill-heavy games, and that was more than most people expected.
Dread, we've seen, you know, the names come back of Hong Kono and Merryday on Blossom. They don't really have the same air about them that they thought, but they don't lack the flair. We've seen the Lucios, we've seen Hong Kono's Illidan, not once but twice, making sure to satisfy the crowd, chanting that on, getting that out. I mean, what do we need from players like that to bring back some of that old magic? Because we know the talent is there, but can they get the upsets and crack into the top three?
It's a little bit difficult, I feel like, to, you know, pin it down to like one specific element, but I feel like the biggest thing to highlight is just it shows the difference of that the smallest choices can actually have a huge impact into the game, right? And we know that those are world-class players, and then all it takes is, you know, as a roster, a couple of small mistakes or different decisions that you see at those elements, and suddenly Blossom with the legendary names like Merryday and Hong Kono look a little bit more mortal. So I would just say it's, you know, trimming the fat when it comes to some of the rougher decisions, you know, like we saw, again, as you highlighted, even from teams like Genji in day one.
Well, it's going to take quite a bit to figure out how they can get to the top, but let's figure out what they're playing for as we take a look at the prize pool, as $100,000 is at stake. Obviously, first place will take home $30,000, second place $20,000, and so on and so forth. But we always know the bigger prize of these clashes is getting that extra spot towards BlizzCon. Korea has already guaranteed that because it's nothing but Korean teams left. So for Korea, they know that they have at least 2 representatives that will be going, 3 representatives now going, but it makes it that much easier to play for. And I think that's where the Blossom story really comes in for me, is that we know Tempest, Ballistics, and Genji are all the household names, but Blossom now, when you bring that star power back, the expectations are different that you could potentially crack into that top 3.
And one of the big stories for me is that it's fascinating to see how engaged the Korean crowd is, and that is especially true when we're talking about Blossom and I would say Ballistics, the two of them more so than the other two teams. Blossom is a bit of a fan favorite, and we've seen them just yesterday cater a lot to those fans with picks that they bring out. When we, for example, have Illidan taken once over, the crowd chanting for it, demanding it, and of course absolutely ecstatic when they then get those picks. And we see also a lot of Ballistics fans in the crowd the entire time. You see a lot of jerseys in there. So it's super interesting to see how the teams are interacting with that, since we heard on the first day that they were a little bit worried about, okay, is that maybe something that makes us nervous? But a lot of them have stated that they really feed off that energy. And once you are the fan favorite team, it's like having an additional man in your roster.
Well, we can take a look at the bracket, obviously, on how we got here. Obviously, the Korean teams pretty much blanking that of the Chinese teams. But if you missed those games, there was definitely a lot of action in that. But then when we start to look at Blossom and Tempest, that was a crazy back-and-forth series. Some of the longest games that we have seen out of the Korean region. Caldor, you had a first look at that yesterday. But obviously, we're going to start the day today with Tempest versus Gen.G. So when we look at this matchup, Tempest, we know them to be the #2 seed. When they played earlier this season, they did pick up one map off of Gen.G. but it's always competitive when we look at these two teams, Dreadnought. We know that Tempest has champions of their own that have been there. But Gen.G right now just seems to be on another level for a lot of these people, but Tempest definitely has the potential to pull off an upset.
I very much agree. And, you know, as you talked about yesterday, the action-packed series that we had between Blossom and Tempest, I think that's going to be a very good indicator on some of the things we can look for Tempest against Gen.G. And my focus is always going to be here on Hyde. When we look at that series, a lot of the plays were made from him as getting a counter initiation when we would see Blossom overextend and try and force the fight. I don't think that he's going to be given the breathing room that we saw him have against Tempest. A lot of the hunts were going on to kill targets rather than to Hyde itself, and I feel like that was why he was able to make those plays. So already my eye immediately goes to, is Gen.G going to apply that pressure to Hyde, and is that too much for Tempest, again, to be able to get this win?
I really wonder, obviously we'll get to the drafts later on as this starts to unfold, but it seemed like Dignitas, when we got to Midseason Brawl, the whole mentality was, let's take away some of these high-impact heroes. The Tracer nerf alone has kind of brought in Tracer out of things. We'll take a look at that as we go on. And just wonder, can you neutralize some of that smothering pressure that we know Gen.G likes to bring in? But first, we're going to take a look at Tempest and some of those members. Dredd, you mentioned Hyde, but we've seen a lot of play from a lot of these members. And Hyde, we get our first look at him right out of the gate. But Kaldor, who else on this team is really standing out to you that could be the potential playmaker?
It's going to be a little bit difficult for them, but I feel here we have the man right in front of us. Sign is the leader of the team, and we've seen him take responsibility whenever they are falling short, so he's the one who really has to lead the team, I feel. Hyde is going to be great for all those plays, but when it comes to the big picture decisions, I'm looking to Sign.
And also Dami, as you see coming up. You were talking about some of the world champions that they have in this roster. This guy, I feel like, was the star of the Summer Global Championship when Tempest was able to claim themselves a world champion. He is on a slightly different role, as we've seen with the adjustment to the off lane. And, you know, I originally was very skeptical when watching their play throughout the league. And, you know, as we asked them kind of about it, you know, Sign was even skeptical at first, but saying the results are kind of there. We think that this is the go-to strategy, as you see him swapping there with Good. And, again, I was very much, I didn't think it would work out for this team, but as things have moved through, I've been very excited to watch both of them perform.
The whole thing about that is that it allows them the flexibility. When we talk to them, they do run Thrall combos with that triple melee, so it does allow that flexibility that maybe they can turn some of that aggression there. Lockdown, we know his role has always been in that back line. We'll see what kind of plays can be made. You think about some of the told stories back in the day, the fall stats, things of that nature for these players. This is something that is still played in the Korean region and can still be quite the playmaker for Tempest.
I mean, for Tempest, another story outside of the game that really stands out to me is when we're talking about Sign. He's married, he has a kid now. We saw them yesterday in the crowd, and that's just something that forces you to grow up very, very quickly. And it's one of these things that just brings him into a position within the team where he is, so to say, the one figure they look to, especially within the Korean culture. So there's a lot of responsibility on his shoulders, and if he can keep a cool head, I think they can deal with these high-pressure situations.
And talking about the family of Tempest here, before we move over to Gen.G, another thing to highlight for me was, like, you know, Lockdown was a player that I looked at originally on the roster when they made the movement over, and I felt very much he was depending on the shoulders of Hyde and going, this is my brother, he's going to be the one to carry the squad, but he very much has stepped up. So not only the motivation from Sign, but I feel like Lockdown's improvement of a player is a large reason we see them securing the second seed there in Korea.
I talked to Sake a bit earlier, and they are very, very confident for the series. I mean, we were talking about how we feel Tempest might be the team to at least push Gen.G and take a map here and maybe pressure them even more. But talking to Gen.G and Sake in particular, he's extremely confident heading into this. They feel they got this. So you can ask, is that a little bit too overconfident? But then again, results are speaking a very clear message here.
Well, Reset yesterday, we saw the Nazebo come out. This is Gen.G. They were the meta breakers at the midseason brawl. Maybe they've got some more tricks up their sleeve. Are they even needed? Rich, we know he can play just about anything. The star power between Rich and Reset on that back line. Dredd, you mentioned the pressure that oftentimes comes out. The aggression that we see from backliners like Rich and Reset are unlike any others. The risk that they are willing to put in there, they have the support around them, but the risks they are willing to take are unlike any other duo we've ever seen.
And we saw that yesterday on Inferno Shrines versus Ballistics. Rich was willing to legitimately put himself on the other side of the line of scrimmage, 1 versus 5, and go, yeah, we have the advantage. We're taking the fight right now. And he very quickly not only kind of asserted himself in forcing it, but he was the man who was quick to end it as well.
Tist obviously on the front line there, does man a lot of that, sets up a lot of these plays, Caldor.
Tiz is actually one of the players that I find extremely fascinating since he's just so quiet and unassuming. Whenever you have interviews with him or with the team, he usually just sits back and doesn't really speak a whole lot, but he's always there for the team when they need it. He's definitely one of those silent players on your team that you can always rely upon and that oftentimes go unnoticed because they're not as flashy as others.
I think it's a balance for that team because Rich and Reset, they like to have fun. We've heard this team when they've played against some maybe weaker teams. They have a lot of fun in communication, but they all seem to know where their responsibilities lie. They have fun with it, but then you look at Sake and you look at Tis. Sake he'll talk because he's the older of the group and he's kind of the leader by default in that sense, but Tis and those, they stay quiet and let the other ones kind of have the fun.
The thing with Genji is that every single time they attend an international event, let's talk GCWC again, you immediately know where exactly Genji is because their scrims are by far the loudest.
Yeah.
They are having fun the entire time from the draft to the plays in game. They're just enjoying what they do, and it translates into their playstyle.
And I want to bring it back to Tis and the focus towards that a little bit there, because I think that's a really cool point that you bring up, right? Tis is kind of this, you know, he feels like it's not that he doesn't mesh with the squad, but he's comfortable just with himself and not going out there making a big personality, things of the like. But his play, I feel like, is very, very different in the enabling that we have there. And we talk about Rich and Reset, like that's the dynamic duo we've known and loved. But when we think about the roster adjustments, it's actually Tist and Reset that are the longest standing team members in that kind of duo. And I feel like the synergy between Rich and Reset, and again, that long-standing background between Tist and Reset is why we see the great follow-up always to those initiations, and then Rich just does what he does. He kills you.
Well, speaking of killing, I want to bring a stat to light because for Tempest, they actually averaged the most kills in the Korean region. They actually averaged 12 kills per game, where Genji has actually taken a step back from their aggressive standpoint. I really think the triple ban has really had an impact on their drafts, and I've said it before, I've seen it in the past. Some of the best things that you can do to counteract the pressure and the aggression of Genji is to quite simply take that aggression back into them. And we'll see as we take a look at the map bans. Tempest banning out Tomb of the Spider Queen, Genji taking Cursed Hollow off the board. Our first battleground, though, in this best of 5 is going to be Sky Temple.
I was just going to say, one thing I want to point out is the fact that we don't have Towers of Doom banned out by Genji. This is something that I think is going to come to light in the series. It has to be highlighted. It's one of the only times that we did see the Battleground win by Tempest over Genji, and as we have highlighted that, they have, since the loss to Miracle with the triple ban coming in week number 4, have shown that Towers of Doom is somehow kind of this kryptonite for Genji. So at least one kind of moment and opportunity here when it comes to the map pool for Tempest.
It's something that Snitch in particular enjoys really quite a lot whenever he's here and talks to Genji, so that's the banter points towards the tournament up to the final.
It is always going to be a fun back and forth between those two, but we are going to have a back and forth between these two teams of Genji and Tempest as we are ready to get the draft going here on Sky Temple between these teams to get our day started. Sky Temple, Abathur for these teams. There's not been as much Abathur bans in Korea in Phase 2 as there was Phase 1.
I mean, especially coming over from Europe, Abathur is one of the heroes that is very, very curious when you look at the Eastern meta, because Eastern teams don't prioritize Abathur to the extent that we see in Europe. I could still see him banned out, but I find that interesting already, because when we're looking towards Korea versus Korea matches, we have seen a high priority on 3 heroes, and that's Diablo, Deckard Cain, and Reyna. And those 3 usually match within the first 3 picks, and now we have 2 of them banned out immediately. So Gen.G already just completely throwing the playbook out here and saying, okay, we're going to play a very different style here. All 3 of them banned out.
But we do see the Hammer opportunity left open, but it's not a battleground that typically
Maiev.
Hammer is going to have. Yeah, that's a great point. I would say the Maiev is one that I would have more concern with than Hammer in this type of circumstance. Gen.G is not going to commit to either, though. Instead, with that Phoenix, not committing really heavily in any direction or another. But I do want to see a Maiev picked up by one of these 2 teams. I feel like the skirmishing capabilities on a map like Sky can really kind of set them apart.
If you have to pick it up, does it have to be before second ban? Can you risk even letting it through? I mean, we know the Hanzo Dragon Arrow into a Warden's Cage has been very profound, but we've seen a lot of containment discs setting up kills as of late. There's going to be the Kerosene pickup.
Need a high mobility warrior whenever you pick up the Karzim. That's one thing that's very important when looking at the Karzim priority out of the Korean region, is that it's almost always paired with a mobile warrior to have that double dive system, much like the, I don't know, old Tyrael Illidan of, like, if you've ever played way back into that meta.
Yeah, in Europe and also in North America, we're leaning a little bit more towards having Garrosh paired with Karazim, since you're trying to get the isolation kills through a 7-sided strike. We've seen that a few times attempted here too, but in general, as you said, it's more trying to dive into the backline with this. And so Nubura coming in very, very early. The ban on Liming still leaves Maiev open, so that's one of the heroes that we have seen in so many of these games here. And the win rate of Maiev, she's all the way up there.
Junkrat and Falstad, post-second ban on this map, has priority for a lot of the Korean region, most notably the Falstad, but more importantly the Junkrat, because he can maintain control over the solo lane in different areas, because Genji will make a play towards that top lane very early in the game when they have this style of composition. The Thrall, as I said before, the triple melee for Tempest, very prominent in a lot of their drafts. That's going to be taken away from them.
I'm surprised to be able to see that ban onto the Thrall taken away, even with the comfort maybe shown by Tempest in the past, and again with the lethality of things like the Maiev. I'm surprised to see that adjustment going more towards that composition rather than, again, what considered or seemed to be considered more objectively powerful picks.
I mean, one of the arguments that we always make on the first day in these clashes is that oftentimes you're still trying to hide a few strategies, especially when you go up against opponents and regions that you perceive as being weaker. So you don't want to show everything you got. And this is what we are seeing here. Genji and Tempest is, of course, a match that both of them take a lot more serious. So all of a sudden, the entire draft pattern that we see from both teams has changed rapidly from what we perceived from day one.
Still need the solo laner. Obviously, Urel has that high priority. And there's the Junkrat. And this is something we'll see Genji do a lot of. Look for Genji to use that Junkrat in the bottom lane, potentially bottom 2 lanes, after they get their night camp, and then heavy dive with that top lane. That's where Kerosene comes in. That's where the Anubarak comes in, and then Phoenix can flex over. There's a scary potential in the early part of the game with this setup.
With the pick that we're seeing on Genji's side, this is one of the things that excites me a lot about BlizzCon in particular, when we are seeing the Eastern and the Western meta clash. Because seeing Urel always this deep in the drafts and sometimes being ignored completely is very, very different when you compare to what happens over in Europe and North America, where Urel is oftentimes an early ban, and if not, then at least makes an appearance either as the first pick or in the first rotation on the other side. So obviously, Gen.G and Korean teams don't respect her as much, and I can't wait for BlizzCon and see who has the better meta there. If Korea has to acknowledge, okay, she is stronger than we expected, and she has more of an impact when Whoopi starts first picking her again, or if all of a sudden Europe has to realize, well, there's other heroes that really need to be prioritized higher, and we can't give that dominance over to Urel any longer.
You say that, and I'm just thinking maybe we dial back Urel a little on some of these numbers and then see if she's still there. But again, Urel is incredibly strong. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to break the rules here. Incredibly strong. But Dreadnought, Falstad, and Junkrat for these teams, no has high priority, ends up being in the last pick position for both of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to help at the later stages, right, when it comes to the overall clear, when and just dealing with the macro pressure. But I can't help but feel like that was very much Gen.G getting the upper hand in that type of situation with the Junkrat pick. The Falstad coming in doesn't really synergize that well. It's just kind of a light response with it, other than having the global opportunity with a Dragon's Arrow with maybe a flight and having that double global being used. I feel like the composition, especially with the high Deckard ban on the side of Tempest, that it doesn't feel like they understood exactly the priority that they wanted once the Karzin came through in the 2-3.
I mean, the one thing that Falstad at least gives you is it gives you a bit more control over the boss area, so that's something that you can use. And depending on how Anubarak is being used to force and engage through Cocoon, you can use Falstad as a last-ditch resort when you're saying, okay, we need to back out of this fight, and you just gust them away. So that, I feel, is what he brings to the table here.
Yeah. I guess I agree with you. I just can't help but feel like wonder is Tempest relying on something that might not exist in that type of, like, even if we get the Gust as a disengage, where's the teamfight initiation and, you know, kill potential happen after here? It feels like Tempest, unless they get an early lead structurally and experience and just really snowball the game out of control by not totally taking and dressing fights, I don't feel like they hold their own toe-to-toe in skirmishes, and then Gen.G will just, again, just kill you.
The one thing that does help, obviously, the Mighty Gust for the disengage. If we do have a Cocoon target, we know the Swarm comes in for Gen.G. They like to follow up on that. We've seen the Containment Disc act similarly to where you just wait, get everybody there, and then you get the kill target. Gust can force that away. We'll see how effective that could be. Obviously, Cleansing Touch in the late game, if that is an option for Sake on the Kerosene. But most notably missing to me, no Abathur on this. Again, it's fallen off heavily for Korea, but this has always been a battleground where he does show, but obviously Maiev as well. Maybe they don't feel the effectiveness could really be there on this more wide-open battleground here.
I mean, another hero that also talk about, or I feel that we have to at least notice Rhaegar coming in as a support.
Yeah.
And it was very much not really, the support role wasn't really contested. You take that card away, but there was nothing heavily banned out. So Rhaegar definitely An interesting choice. Rising, of course, a little bit in priority these days, but still I didn't expect him to make an appearance this early in draft number 1.
And again, you know, I completely agree with you. And again, that's why I was saying with the Decker Band, it just seemed a little bit weird with the 2-3 Karzin coming in. And when you saw that Rhaegar, I figured that this was kind of the long con. They wanted the Rhaegar with a high value target to be able to get the Ancestral coming through. But then we look at it, we have a Murden and a Blaze. The other 2 targets to be able to get the Ancestral is Hanzo and Falstad. Useless, not useless if you barely keep them alive, but you're not going to get the same value out of those melees, right? That is what Uther is great at, the squishies. Rhaegar is for your bruisers, and Blaze is not normally that target that you look for that. So I have concern there, again, with the priority from Tempest if they didn't have the game plan before the game started.
We're going to see what that game plan is, as it is time to get underway here. Game number 1, Sky Temple, Gen.G versus Tempest here in the winners finals.
Game number 1, ladies and gentlemen, as we are heading into the match between Tempest and Gen.G, the best of 5 starting off on Sky Temple here. And over to the left, we have Tempest with Hyde on Rhaegar, Sign on Murden leading the team. Dami on Blaze with the offlane hero, Good on Hanzo, and Lockdown on Falstad.
On the right in red will be that of Gen.G, as it's going to be Sake on that Karazim reset. Manning the solo on the Junkrat. Rich will be on the Phoenix. Kyo-chan, Yrel, and Tisk leading the front line. He'll be on the Anubarak.
Now, we talked a bit about the Rhaegar pick on the side of Tempest after Deckard was banned out and Karazim taken. It's surprising to see him making that appearance here in that slot, since we've seen a huge priority on other heroes at first. But there's still the cleanse on level 7 that's really important here, and we all assume that we're going to see the Cocoon from Anubarak, so that's something where we can definitely look towards Hyde and see how many times he's able to deny these plays to Gen.G.
Got to be quick on the fingers on those.
Yeah.
He's capable, but it is
He's
no easy task. Now, again, for Gen.G, they got the early rotation bottom, and it looks like they got exactly what they wanted, but Tempest got exactly what they wanted in return. That's actually going to be first blood.
First blood for Tempest here, opening the game up with a bang. Very early kill for them, and already pressuring Reset heavily here in the middle as well. In comes Saka, and he gets the kill, but the countermeasure as Junkrat falls too.
Reset's trying to bait him in. Unfortunately, you know, Dami says, I'm here too.
Yeah.
But things starting out quick here. 3 kills in the first minute, Kaldor. These teams not afraid to throw down. Again, the 2 highest kill teams in the world in kills per game between Gen.G and Tempest. But obviously it's the Korean flavor that we know we get out of those kills. But breaking up that early game momentum that we know Gen.G likes to have, they've accomplished it so far. And they're also, Tempest, they're also going to be the first to their Knights, which is something Gen.G generally tries to accomplish.
Yeah, the thing is that when you talk to Tempest, they are very well aware that they are more or less in an underdog position here going up against Gen.G. They acknowledge how strong Gen.G is. And we talked a little bit earlier about how confident Gen.G finds themselves in the situation right now. They want to win this tournament. But Tempest comes out swinging, and I like the aggression that they show here, that they're not afraid and that they're just saying, okay, we are able to go toe-to-toe with our opponent here. They might be a stronger team in general, but if we can maybe win on map number 1, we could carry some momentum into the rest of the series.
They're going to use Reset and Tist in the bottom lane. They'll get the Phoenix and the Karazim after they cleared out mid. We'll go to the top to deal with this Night Camp, and of course, we're 50 seconds away from the first Temple phase. So Gen.G, they're going to remix it just a little, and then they'll go back and get their Knights and try and get that top lane push with that first Temple, which we know has been extremely effective to get that first fort down, because right now Gen.G does find themselves down in experience.
Yeah, they're taking their camp a bit later. Tempest got quite a bit out of that push with the early Night Camp, but now of course Gen.G is going to respond to it. The 2 temples are about to be activating, and that's where we're going to see the focus heavily on the objective, trying to control the structures early on in the game. But I think if Tempest plays their cards right with the defense right now, they should actually be able to deal with the Night Camp at the top lane without losing too much and just in time for the objective.
Gen.G going to take control of the eye, at least momentarily, to see if Tempest does make that rotation up and how much time they do have. Rich and team, they're moving it. So we do see a slightly different approach here. That approach is to try and take control of this middle temple, at least momentarily, to get some early aggression in.
I'm really liking the way Tempest is running this. They had a few rotations into lanes where they just dominated structures, took down a turret here and there, and that's exactly what you need to do on Sky Temple. They're trying to get ahead in infrastructure, and they are doing very well with these early rotations. Now Blaze is dealing with the camp at the top, gives Yrel a bit more time to get some shots in, but the main fight is happening here in the middle.
The knockback there as Lockdown starting to come in on the side there on Falstad. Did make the rotation up. Level 7 almost here for Tempest. That will be great for their wave clear, especially when it comes to the Falstad. Gen.G not willing to concede it just yet as Tis moves forward on the Temple.
Good damage coming out of Good, hitting Rich pretty hard here on the Phoenix. Job well done, keeping them at bay. And Genji isn't really willing to commit to the Temple at this point. Tempest is still holding on to that slight lead in experience. And also the tiny advantage that they have when it comes to structures on the map.
You know, Caldor, sometimes we see these teams, especially around that top lane, try to be more aggressive to get that first fort, but both teams playing a more cautious approach here in the early game. Not the aggression we see after that first minute. They're like, hold on, wait a second, Hyde, he's going to get knocked back in. Sake continuing to try and make the plays. The grenades, is it going to snipe it? It does. Gets the snipe over the wall.
Fantastic kill here by Junkrat, really well done. Hyde played this so well, dodging out on everything, healing himself just behind the gate, but it's the last tiny grenade that comes over, the nade to the face, and down he goes. Another kill for Gen.G. Also, when it comes to talents, by the way, just quickly highlighting here that we have Divine Sea taken for Urel, which is a talent that a lot of the Korean teams have started to move away from after the nerf.
Yeah, the way that we've seen Gen.G play it, obviously, is to just continue to stack that when you do get the dive on with your teammates or just protect a teammate. With an Anubarak, you would think that maybe you're going directly into the enemy, you get that cooldown reduction at level 7, and then you can supply more and more of that armor more rapidly, but this is a very different change, but obviously Sky Temple does have slightly different rotations than the other maps.
Yeah, double soaking is definitely a huge thing here, and that's something that where we have now the mobility on URL that you really want to have for that. Genji has taken over experience lead. It's a small one at that, but it matters when it comes to the second objective. Once that temple number 2 on the bot side is activating, you want to head into level 10 so that you can get the position before your opponent is taking his. That's also where the global is going to come into play for Tempest. Falstad at that top lane should be there, but right now we're having him still at the bottom. There should be a rotation, and at this point, Falstad is already headed topside. Yeah,
you generally see that rotation slightly earlier, but we are now going to see that changing of the guard there as Blaze has made his way down to the mid. Gen.G, they have rapidly approached level 10. Tempest not too far behind. Falstad will make the rotation up. See how quickly he gets that wave clear. Just clears one wave, makes his way down. We might have our first big 5-on-5 team fight here momentarily.
And of course, once again, Junkrat already controlling with his mines concussion grenades everything here, especially the entrance. But Sake is on the point, 10 is in for both of the teams. Falstad at the top, already making his way towards the middle so that he is in flight range. Can always jump down here when needed, but in the meantime, he's going to try and clear some of these waves.
Here we go, Salvo's out, Gust gets Rich deep into enemy territory. The Ancestral's going to land. Rich going to be the first to fall after that Dragon Arrow. We'll see if the fight continues as Sign goes in. 7-sided strike in return.
Bunker on the other hand, saving them here. And Tempest with that kill against Rich is in a fantastic position. They're a bit low, but they're still fine here. Reset is trying to capitalize on the low HP pools by getting a bit more random damage to the nades in, but he's not getting enough to really force a kill. The attempt to go for good, but a perfect cleanse from Hyde, and what a save by Rhaegar.
Now Sign diving on the backside, just trying to thwart some of the damage. Instead, Falstad going to be the first to fall here. Hyde, he's on the backside, trying to trade out any way he can. Reset somehow with 9 lives. This is now 3 members down on the side of Tempest. Sign, he's going to hop into a bush, see if he can sneak out of here. Tist, will he spot him in the bush? Do they find him? They do not, but Gen.G, despite losing Phoenix, Caldor, turned that fight.
And the biggest problem here was that the fountain was already eliminated at the bot lane, so Tempest couldn't tap at the fountain. Gen.G was in a 4 versus 5 situation, but what allowed them to go into that battle was that Tempest was low on the HP pools and couldn't top it off at the well. So they moved in, and they just kept Junkrat alive the entire time. It was a really close call, but Gen.G wins one of the most important fights in the game, and now Tempest is on the back foot, and that is always a problem when you're playing on Sky Temple.
We'll see how the temples do spawn going forward, because the boss will always be a point of contention. You have the Gust control, you have Hanzo, who can race this better than anybody. Genji has turned some attention to the top lane, at least for now, with that camp.
I really want to say, though, that I like the way that Tempest played the last fight when they targeted Rich in particular. Falstad flying in and using the Gust, and then also Hanzo with the interrupt on the warp. That was fantastic coordination. And those plays can really make the difference later on. So Tempest showing their teeth in these fights and saying, hey, listen, we can take you down. it turned around against Tempest, but I really feel that that approach that Tempest is running right now is the correct one if they want to have a chance of defeating Genji in this series.
Oh, here we go. There's going to be the Dragon Arrow, the follow-up stun, reset, somehow surviving again, makes it out of this fight, but Lockdown comes in from behind with the Gust, not enough in time to save Rhaegar. He does get the kill. His barrel roll still down. He's being tracked down. See if Lockdown has any way to escape. It looks like his team has pretty much said, look, you're done, you're dead, we'll come back for you later, but a 2-for-1 trade in favor of Genji.
They honestly have a problem taking Junkrat down. They focus on one specific target, but whenever it's reset, he's able to get away. Now, he died towards the end as Falstad goes in, but the problem is Falstad suicides for that kill, puts himself in a spot where he can't escape anymore. But if they can play it a little bit crisper and take Junkrat down, then I think Tempest's chances of starting to win these fights are pretty strong. But for now, it's Gen.G with another great opportunity here, and a perfect 7-sided isolation drops Murder.
That timing on that burrow charge
Yeah.
was impeccable, and that's going to be the fate of Sign. Shorter death timers here still early in the game as it's 5 seconds away from the Temple phase. He'll be slightly behind in terms of that respawn timer. More importantly, Tempest did get on even talent tiers, but they're starting to find themselves further and further down in overall XP.
No, Rhaegar has a bit more of a chance now with the shield on 13 to keep heroes alive and maybe just put them in the spot where he's able to drop the Ancestral in the first place. So this is something that really is going to help them here. But Gen.G is running away with the experience. So Tempest needs to force something now while they're still on even talents. We're having Falstad defending the bot lane, but he is going to move in pretty soon.
Rich, you can see at the top of your map, we already saw one aggressive salvo positioning. We'll see if he comes in for another. Falstad starting to make his way up. In comes Rich. Sign trying to target, interrupts the warp there, and now they're going in, trying to get the stun, but the Riptire grabbing control.
Sign is in trouble, and he's the focus, but the Ancestral is true height, is keeping him alive, and the bunker goes down. But great aggression against Phoenix. The problem is that Tempest is sacrificing a lot of cooldowns and HP to put Rich into that awkward spot. They have to retreat again. Rhaegar is just not able to keep up with all that damage that comes out of Genji.
I think Tempest knows they cannot continue to trade out on this. 16 so close for Genji. This is going to be the best chance to fight, at least momentarily, on even talent tiers, and Genji recognizes that. They don't have a whole lot left in terms of cooldowns for heroics, but their cooldowns slightly even on the timers. They'll just go down and trade in the bot lane.
But look at the minimap. This is the biggest problem. Where does Gen.G get that experience lead from? They took out the structures. They took out the outer ring. There is no fort on the map anymore for Tempest, but Gen.G holds onto all these outer structures. So from a map objective perspective, Gen.G is miles ahead of Tempest right now. And Tempest's only redeeming quality is like if they can move in, drop these forts, and close an experience gap. But with Gen.G now holding a 2-level lead and an extra talent, that is nearly impossible for them to pull off without overextending and allowing Gen.G to force a fight that they don't want to take.
I am curious if Tempest does get desperate. They have the Mighty Gust, they have the race from Hanzo on if they will attempt that boss in the near future. For Gen.G, when you have this much lead, those structures that you just mentioned, sometimes you can concede a boss because you are so far ahead structurally. So we'll see what the call is. I'm curious though, Sake go in with the cleansing touch, see if he can make one of those magical cleanses happen, and if he can read that Mighty Gust and maybe keep somebody like an Anubrak or a Yrel on point for defense.
I mean, you look at the way that Tempest was forcing these fights and the way they were playing them. They targeted Rich whenever he was attempting to go into salvo range, and cleansing out the stuns here is going to be a huge asset for Saka with his Charism to make sure that Rich isn't that vulnerable any longer. So I feel that talent makes it even more difficult for Tempest to get anything done here, and they are already far behind. But then again, as a saving grace, they're half a level away from 16, and there's no objective on the map. Gen.G hasn't made the move for the boss yet, so if they just soak that bit of experience, they at least get 1 or 2 additional fights on even talents against their opponent.
You bring up an excellent point because the next temple phase is in the middle. It's also a single temple phase, so if there is any type of boss shenanigans, it's a quick rotation for both teams. So for Tempest, they know exactly where Gen.G will be. They can have that even fight unless something breaks out in between there. They get a pick somehow behind this night camp that is pressing in very hard. Then yeah, Tempest will have many chances, or at least one golden opportunity coming up soon.
Tempest is playing this a bit defensive since they know they still need the experience. Genji would love nothing more than Tempest stepping out a bit too far and trying to chase them here as they are taking down the minions. But it's only a sliver of XP that's needed for 16 to drop, and there we have it now. So this is the moment when Tempest has to think about, okay, how do we play this? Do we make the play for boss? Do we go for the temple first? How can we force Genji now into a fight where we can finally start a comeback?
We're going to find out 18 seconds until the temple is active. Genji just trying to establish control in that bot lane with those siege camps. If this prolongs, if this goes on for a period of time, then Tempest will fall behind. They do have the Falstad, but getting that positional control while Falstad is out trying to deal with the camp is exactly what Genji is trying to accomplish here. They want to establish dominance early before this breaks out. Falstad, you can see on the minimap, is holding point in the bottom.
Look at the nice completion on the Season Marksman here, but look at the talents for Rega, going for Hunger of the Wolf here. They had so many times where a target just barely escapes, and they want to confirm, to secure that kill. And Muradin also going into stone form here. So we have like two heroes that go for a bit of a different approach. Muradin realizing that he's getting blown up too quickly by the 7-side and wants to keep himself alive, and they still want to get these kills, and Rega is a good source for extra damage. But of course, whenever he goes in deep, he exposes himself. So they really need to get these kills when they make the call.
Riptire is already out. See if they find Reset in the bush. He will survive for now, but the action back onto the temple as the knockback comes in. Sign with the stun. There's going to be the cleanse. Ardent Defender is out. Rich with the salvo only onto Tommy. Remember, Bunker is down. Lockdown skirmishing in the mid lane with Reset. The fight will continue.
They're going in. They have to force that fight at some point. Tempest just can't sit back and trade shots here. They're in a situation where they really need to drop a few of these forts to get that experience. They're having in the bot lane also pushing. That's another timer against Tempest as Gen.G is aiming for a better position. Look at the minimap again. Look at Rich here. He's always so far out looking for that salvo flank.
This is aggressive positioning, trying to see if anybody is willing to start that camp. Somebody that they can get the blow up onto. 7-sided strike is available.
They're waiting for the rotation. They actually expected someone to go through the path here. That wasn't the case. So Tempest taking a bit of a safer route towards the left. Now that they're taking the camp, they also double-checked the bush that is right next to it. But if someone would have moved straight down to that position, Genji would have pounced on him and taken him down.
Caldor, Genji, still a level ahead. The structural advantage. Tempest did find their way back in by getting some control of that temple, or at least the majority control. They do find themselves down potentially the 20 tier if they let it play out without making something happen. How much do they actually need to do here? Do they need to try and force the fight? Obviously, the structure is great, but in the experience race, Genji's so far ahead still.
And they are ahead against the global, which is even more important. So right now, Tempest knows that they have to do something. And the first thing they want to accomplish is drop that bottom fort. But Genji is there, already defending it. And Tempest will eventually be forced into a position where they have to think about, okay, do we force a boss fight before Genji hits level 20? And the problem is, if they don't do that, then they need to catch experience quickly and spread out on 3 lanes.
It is top-bottom temple. This is almost worst-case scenario. If Tempest doesn't make something happen and they fall down that 20 tier, yes, they have the global, but they risk not even just trading out, but taking a 20-tier fight in the bot lane that Gen.G will have the favored advantage, and then the boss right there. If things go wrong, it's lights out, game over. So for Tempest, they're not doing much.
Yeah, both teams are now trying to get some camp pressure going, and Hanzo, of course, doing that here at the top quite easily, single-handedly. But now this is really the moment. Storm talents will be there, and Tempest, they have neglected to go and force a fight early on. They could have gone for the boss, so the only thing they are doing now is double-checking if Gen.G is trying to take it with the advantage to maybe use Falstad and sneak it past. And that's one of the main reasons why Gen.G has never tried to go for boss so far, because they know that Falstad is there, but now their cleanse is ready and they can really try and force this.
Tempest, will they give up this boss? Gen.G started it, they're going to leash it. They see that Dami and team have taken their eye on it. Tist in position. If Dami steps out even a bit too far, he's got to be careful here. They are in full pursuit. You can see the cleansing touch onto Tist to make sure he gets through anything that could have thwarted him. Dami does make it to safety, though.
This is actually really good for Tempest.
Yeah.
They're going to lose the bottom key, but that's something that you at some point have to just acknowledge is going to happen. But the fight here so far is really actually still good for Tempest. A lot of heroic abilities blown, a lot of cooldowns being used here, but Sign survives as he pops the avatar. The top temple has been taken by Falstad. He never joined for the fight. 20 is there for Tempest. The camp is pushing through. Tempest losing the second keep is an issue, but at least they can fight another time. They can force one team fight and are still in this for now.
Yeah, they have the global, as you've said, and that gives them kind of a leeway when you do have those keeps down. So I think this is pretty much best case, because all it takes is one fight either way, and Tempest now is back in this game despite being down keeps. Junkrat is now showing on the top lane. As you said, Lockdown did spend some time clearing out that top camp before he got on the temple, giving them some more potential control. And now that now that Junkrat has shown on top, here we go. This might be it. Falstead, will they continue this? We need the Falstead flight in. Did not go continuous wins, so we'll see if it goes in. In comes Falstead. Here we go.
And they are going for it, but look at Rich once again. He's coming in from the side with the salvo, but immediately we're having the stun dropped. The cleansing touch is keeping him in play here. Here comes the cocoon. Boss is getting leashed slowly. The Riptire gets eliminated. The bunker is out and they're going for it.
And here we go. 7-sided strike blows up Blaze before he's able to hop back into the bunker. Sign trying to hold point. Lockdown. He's just trying to get out of dodge here. And now Kyocha going in, trying to get the kill here. The fight is all over the place now.
Rhaegar was trying to get close enough on Ancestral, and that didn't work out. Nice escape by Lockdown. High to the immediate Ancestral, and he is out. Flying away here. They keep everyone in play. I'm insanely impressed that only Blaze died. That was actually crazy.
Well, now with Blaze dead, it's a 5-on-4. Gust is down, still 18 seconds away. So now this is Genji. They are looking. This boss will end game if it does come into play. So now Tempest, they have to make a defense here. 4v5. Rhaegar making his way down. 6 seconds away till that Gust. Can they hold for now?
This is absolutely crazy. This is going to be so difficult. They're trying to fly in, but that is the end of Falstad. A bit of a suicidal move there. I expected Murden to try and make the play here, but he got shut down quickly. And now we're having two heroes down. The boss is taken. Good is falling on Hanzo, and that is not the only one. Rhaegar is chased as well as Gen.G is moving through. The shields have fallen on the core through the catapults, and we have the red team going straight for victory in game number 1.
Unable to get that Gust off in time. He got blown up there. You could see the thought process, as you said, Murden getting locked down there. But Gen.G, they get through game number 1, 11 kills to 4, did have control over most of this, but Tempest put up a heck of a fight, Kaldor.
They definitely put up a fight here, and in the end, you know, if Falstad flies in, obviously, if you're Gen.G, what do you expect? You know that someone is waiting. You know that they're going to try and make the play. It's the only thing they can do. It's a Hail Mary, so you just wait there with Karazim, and as soon as you see someone moving in, there is a 7-sided. So they had Cocoon available, they used that. Murden didn't make it onto the point, and then Falstad, the only one to fly in, attempt the Gust, gets blown up right away. It was great play by Gen.G, and they just controlled every single aspect of it. I feel it comes down to the early fights again. If Tempest is able to get these kills against Junkrat that we've seen several times attempted, then it could be a different game. But with Gen.G just playing that perfectly, they never had the chance to get the momentum.
Dread, Tempest held on in some of the toughest moments and fought their way back. It just wasn't enough to stand up to Gen.G in game number 1.
And I want to bring up the point that they held on in numbers, but they didn't really hold on to too many points of that game outside of the major boss opportunities that, you know, to be able to recover from the structural disadvantage that they found themselves in. And that was something I brought up through a lot of the drafts we saw yesterday. There I lose less composition. It doesn't really increase your odds of winning the game. It just decreases the pace at which you lose it. And I'm not saying that they didn't have the opportunity to win with that draft. I think they very much did. But once the momentum got against them, it was more just stopping the bleeding and really no win condition outside of a miracle boss, which quickly was dismantled with a nice little cocoon.
Sounds like a lava wave, you know, just delays the inevitable, right, Kaldor?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have a colleague that still doesn't see the light when it comes to that discussion, but that's a topic for another time.
That's fine. It was still last week we heard you concede that it might have been a good pickup, but our focus obviously is here today. And with Gen.G obviously taking control there, I mean, it seemed like this is kind of the pacing that we expect from Korean teams. We had 3 kills in the first minute, a bit of a lull, and then the action picked right back up, and it was led by Rich with his flanks on any hero. I don't see people make, like, sometimes you see that and you're like, oh, that's a mistake. But Rich is like, it's fine. Like, I can do this. And it's paying off. Obviously not in the early part, though.
But it's risky, though. I mean, he fell in the beginning once, and several times he was actually in trouble and could have died again. So it's risky plays that pay off for them. But if you come back to Junkrat escaping several times, if those kills happen, I like the approach that Tempest takes. And you talked about momentum, Dread. If the kills happen, all of a sudden momentum is in favor of Tempest, and then we're looking with the global in their hands at a very different game. So I think the approach that they have is something that can succeed if they get a bit more crisp towards these early game fights so that they can gain that momentum. Because as you said, once the momentum shifted against them, you're just on a losing path no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I very much don't feel like, the tools weren't there in the game itself for Tempest as much as I feel like a lot of it comes down to legitimately their second ban. I think that their second ban with maybe they didn't expect the Karzim priority in the 2-3 from Gen.G, and that was enough to kind of bite them later on to not know how to deal with that. I was in the back and G-Club was like, they banned out their own Li Ming. They had to pick up the false head later on, and I feel like, again, that started with that first ban towards the Deckard. So I think the draft adjustments are absolutely the area where I think that we can see adjustments from Tempest, and I go, okay, maybe they got a shot here.
One of the things that I also found really nice is that when we had the first little skirmish around the boss area, and especially Blaze fell, and it was Genji just zoning out Rhaegar the entire time. They realized once the bunker was dropped, okay, they're going to try and save him. The only tool they have is the Ancestral. Move past it, zone out Rhaegar, make sure he can't get close enough, and then we have an easy kill against Blaze. If they don't make that and the Ancestral goes through, we're again looking at a very different team fight. Genji knows exactly what they have to do to win these fights, no matter how close they look.
Every time Reset is on Junkrat, it's kind of like, can we find him? This guy, he goes way back. He finds himself in a bush far off in a distant land, and then he's able to get some of that zoning control as we saw with the Riptire, especially in that choke point, and they're always impactful. I think in that one he did get interrupted. They found him, but was it too late at that point? Because it's like, all right, we can hold, but is it enough? But Junkrat, we know, is very strong. We'll see if it is stronger here, as our next battleground is going to be Volskaya, picked up here by Gen.G. And, guys, last game we didn't see a Sergeant Hammer ban and we didn't see a Maiev ban. I can tell you one thing, that if I don't see a Sergeant Hammer ban or pick or a Maiev ban or pick, I'm going to be highly surprised on this battleground.
Yeah, especially I think of the Hammer, the oppression that can have around the control, not only on the actual control point themselves, but also in the downtime. We look at Volskaya's, I think at least my criticism towards the battleground is absolutely some of the downtimes that you can find due to the lack of mercenary pressure. Sergeant Hammer is a built-in mercenary pretty much with the sieging capabilities. Just to sit there and just go, all right, we're going to post up. You're going to have to be able to find a way to deal with this. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and I also want to see how Tempest adjusts now, because the false set pick didn't really convince me too much on Sky when it comes to globals, where you're normally looking more towards Dehaka. They, of course, made the choice for Blaze to have a little bit more teamfight presence, rely heavily on the bunker to negate some salvo damage that came out on the other side. But I really want to see how they're changing up their own draft style now to react to that.
Well, speaking of draft style, we're going to find out how this draft unfolds as we are ready to head into the draft here. Game number 2 on Volskaya Foundry.
I think one thing